Fraser Myers on Talk Drive. Good afternoon, Fraser. How are you?
Good afternoon, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Can we start with that? Because the thing about the news is you get the news every day and you think, what am I going to do? And then halfway through the first bit, I think, oh, yeah, that's fair. So this report today that says that taxpayers have been funding development projects in parts of the world that are richer in essence than some areas of the UK. The study by the Institute of Economic Affairs, the IDA, found that over the past 5 years, British overseas development assistance has been spent in areas of China, Mexico and Malaysia, right? This is under the Tories as well, right? And these areas, these countries are better off than our own country. And without wanting to sound like some nut job, because the bedwetters will say, you don't understand what it's like to live in Malaysia. Well, it's obviously bloody better than living in Great Britain because people in this country are struggling and are going to look at that and go, are you having a laugh?
And we should look at some of the projects we've been funding. I think the thing is when you hear the words foreign aid, you think it's going to be used to pay for people recovering from humanitarian disasters,
yes,
food to deal with famine. You know, people have had an earthquake and you're providing them temporary accommodation, those kinds of things. And I think we all want to pay for those things. I'm happy to pay for those things. I'm happy for the taxpayer to pay for those things. When you actually look at what is being spent in some of these issues, the mind boggles. So, for instance, we learn that in China, the British taxpayer is paying for an all-female opera house. Why? If China wants that, they should be able to pay for it. China is the second richest economy on earth. They can more can afford that than we can. Our own opera houses are struggling. If you believe that that's the thing that taxpayers
do we get any foreign aid from countries because people in this country are struggling? Does anybody send any foreign aid to the United Kingdom?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, the other examples you've given, OK, Mexico is a poorer country than Britain, but Mexico City is richer than many parts of Britain, the capital. And, you know, we're spending it on helping them develop a smart city. You know, there's various traffic calming measures in Kuala Lumpur. Again, these are not what people think of when they imagine foreign aid. And I think this has always been the case. The government, and really it's Whitehall, actually, you know, the sort of blob of the civil service, has been able to get away with funding sort of pet projects by disguising them as humanitarian.
Do you know the IEA described the spending as Robin Hood in reverse and said the government needs to urgently reevaluate our aid priorities? I mean, I'm absolutely with you. You know, interestingly, in this survey, Yemen, Syria and Somalia, yeah, I don't think we should be supporting certain regimes like that. But there are countries across the world, and you're right. You think about flooding, you think about earthquakes. Of course, you're prepared to pay money to provide, you know, sanitation processes and blankets and food and medical supplies, but not to create a female opera house in, where did you say?
I think that was in Shenzhen in China, just over the border from Hong Kong.
It's just bloody ridiculous. And again, I'm going to bring it back to something I said last week, Fraser. I think it's really, really dangerous if this new government assumes that, you know, the whole everybody who rioted was far right. And I've no time for those thugs. I said last week they would be very, very, very wrong to think that everybody who is concerned about immigration and the issues of this country is a far-right thug. They would also need to wake up and realise that if you sort of say to people, you know what, we can't afford to look after our own, so I'm afraid foreign aid's going to have to do one. This doesn't make you some sort of murderous, horrendous person who should be thrown into the sea and never to be seen. I don't understand what's wrong with looking after your own first and foremost. I've never understood that.
No, I think that's completely normal. I think that's a natural human instinct. And also, you know, we're not well placed to tell Chinese people or foreign people what they should do, how money should be spent there. Actually, they're better off doing that. Yep. If we want to help other people abroad, let's invest in their businesses. Let's help them grow their economies. Let's not give them charity. That, you know, how much charity has Africa had? I desperately want to see Africa to develop. I desperately want people there to be rich. But so many of the schemes that we've tried, they're not working. They're not right for the people there on the ground. They're probably not what those people immediately lead. They prioritise our own needs and, let's face it, our own feelings. A lot of this is about us.
Well, Vincent says it's about us, and he says he doesn't know what to do. He says one of his joys in life is to go fishing. He works hard. He likes to go fishing. Everything's gone up. He can't afford a fishing licence. He said, "Where do I apply for some aid?" Now you might laugh at that, but that's the point. At what point do we? I mean, I will be castigated as always. Oh, well, you don't understand. I don't want to... Sorry, China can afford their own ruddy female-only... Oh, don't start me. Right, let's move on to Yvette Cooper, the new Home Secretary. She says today, this is brilliant, I'll lock up more migrants, right? Illegal migrants. And I'll deport more. And I'm going to make it work. And then everybody stood up and gone, what, that's a travesty? And it's a travesty because we haven't had any meat on the bone at all. I mean, it's the same old lingo, isn't it? I've heard nothing substantial apart from them saying that they're going to attack illegal gangs and they're going to create a border czar. But we're 7 weeks in and the recruitment process hasn't finished yet. What's going on? Do they have a plan, Fraser Myers? Do they?
Yeah, they've set up this border security command, but as you say, there's no border security commander. There are certain, small details, like they're increasing the size of the National Crime Agency dealing with migration. But I think that sort of misses the point. The reason people come here and the reason people are allowed to stay, and I think that's probably the bigger issue. They know that they can stay. They know that they probably are not going to be deported if they do come here illegally. That's a huge pull factor. That's always going to attract people to come. That's always going to attract...
Can I just pick you up on that and not actually pick you up? Can I just throw that out for people? People come to this country. I've heard all the bedwetters tell me it's because we're the only country that treats people well. You have to come to Britain because everybody speaks English and everybody's got a family member. Right, I get all of that. The fact is we're soft. And the fact is people come here because they know there's no deterrent and there's no way once they get to these shores to make them go. And then all the humanitarians jump up and down. I maintain what I've always maintained. I want to help, like you, people who are suffering, genuinely suffering. Said it yesterday, Fraser, say it to you. If I escaped a war-torn country, I'd do two things. I'd bring my wife and kids, I wouldn't leave them behind. Interesting. And the first time I reached a piece of land that was safe, I'd stay there. Everybody comes here because we are soft. And even that is not my main concern. They come here because we're soft, but we do that to the detriment of our own people. I do not believe that is racist. I don't believe it's wrong to say it. I believe it's true. And that whole awful thing about charity beginning at home, I know it sounds awful, but surely the argument should be, yeah, we will help the world, and yeah, we will look out for the rest of the world when we've looked out for the people in this country. No, not the South, the people up north who have worked all their lives, working class men and women. I was in Newcastle at the weekend. They are furious. They're not Labour voters, they're not Tory voters, probably most of them voted Reform. They feel like they're being left behind. That's the truth.
Yeah, and I want to give two examples that back up what you're saying there. So recently, you may have heard the case of a Kurdish migrant. He pushed an elderly man onto the tube in Oxford Circus. Thankfully, he wasn't harmed because a member of the public saw it immediately and managed to pick him up. He's just been found guilty of attempted murder. He had, I think it was 12 convictions by the time he committed this crime. And there was no effort to deport him. He was Kurdish. He was here illegally. He had no right to be here, but no one had bothered to think to take him out of the country. Similarly, this week, a man was sent down for 11 years because he stabbed his own immigration lawyer. He was from Eritrea. He had only just been let out early from a release because he'd committed 11 previous crimes, right? So precisely the kind of people who need to be deported immediately are not only not being deported, but they're being let out of prison early. Sometimes they're being allowed to sort of wander around and do whatever they like. It seems, they're carrying on attacking people. In some cases, this is not just British people's safety who's being compromised. If you think about the Clapham alkali attacker, Abdul Azidi, who attacked a woman and her children. We don't know the identity of this woman, but it's believed that she was living in asylum accommodation. She was an asylum seeker who came to this country in search of safety. And what happened when she got here? Immediately, she was attacked by an Afghanistani national, again, who had no right.
But why, if you say that and you give those examples, why would the Liberals or the left say you're being really unfair, it's a racist way to describe it, these poor people come from terrible countries, blah, blah, blah? Why shouldn't we, and it might get me into trouble, I don't care, why shouldn't we look after our own? Why shouldn't we defend our country? Why shouldn't we say there isn't enough to go round, I'm very sorry, you're going to have to go somewhere else? What's bloody well wrong with that? I don't get it. I've never got it.
What I would say to those Liberals is that how are you going to get the public to support being generous to outsiders, which I think we should be, being generous to people in need, if we know that when things do go wrong, and they do quite often, when you have cases like this, egregious cases of people committing crimes, when you know that actually the system puts their rights ahead of the public safety, that's just going to make people think, well, I don't want anyone to come in. That just actually, it turns the public against the very idea of giving people asylum.
I think I don't think asylum and the argument of immigration is going to go away at all. Just one final thing, Fraser. I'd just like your response to something we only just got. Really good to have you on as ever, my friend. Always welcome. Robert Jenrick, doing the rounds, was with Julia yesterday, gave some interview today. He's admitted to taking Ozempic to try and get thin. He's had a haircut. He's obviously, in my mind, trying to appeal to the Tory masses, the 163 people who decide, 163,000 who decided that Rishi Sunak was good enough to be British Prime Minister. Boris Johnson would be in my cabinet, says Robert Jenrick. Fraser Myers?
Yeah, that does sound like a bit of a way of appealing to the grassroots, saying, I'm on your side, I'm on that wing of the party, I'm not one of the wets, I think is one of the things that Robert Jenrick is trying to say. Because he seemed like that when he was in Rishi Sunak's cabinet, but he has made a bit of a conversion.
Let's be honest, let's give him some credit. Let's give him some credit. He actually had the BALLSs to walk out and resign because he didn't like the way that government was doing its business. He didn't hang around. He went to the back benches. And it says something that he was put into the immigration service, seemingly by either Sunak or Johnson, I can't remember, to keep an eye on Suella Braverman. And we all know what happened to her. She imploded. There are many people who think that Jenrick would be in the final two. I think he's probably more experienced than Badenoch. Could be interesting.
I think he's definitely got a really strong chance. And I think the fact that he's been on this journey and able to tell that kind of story, I think is really going to help him. It means that he can kind of appeal to both wings of the party. I mean, I'm personally in favour of Badenoch, but I think he's got a very, very strong chance. And fair play to him on the Ozempic front as well. He looks great, and he wasn't going to be able to hide that fact for very long. We'd all spotted that he'd been...
Yeah, that's a bit dramatic, Robert. There you go. Listen, mate, really good to have you on, Fraser. Spiked, of course, Deputy Editor. We appreciate your support here.